No one told him a human was coming. The lecture hall on level 7 of the Galactic Academy held more than 300 students from 40 different species. The room was shaped like a giant bowl, with curved rows rising toward the high ceiling. Through the enormous windows behind the professor's platform, a massive blue gas giant glowed softly, filling the hall with calm blue light. Professor Kalani stood at the front of the class. Her body was made of living crystal. Every movement she made sent tiny flashes of color through her transparent form. At the moment, she was explaining how different species across the galaxy breathed different types of gases. Some students needed oxygen. Others breathed methane, that a few rare species even survived on chlorine. The class listened carefully. Then the door opened. The smooth metal panel slid apart with a soft hiss. Every head turned. Someone stepped inside, that a human, that he wasn't very tall, at least not by human standards. His skin was brown, his hair short and black, and he wore the simple gray uniform given to exchange students at the academy. A small bag hung from one shoulder. He paused just inside the doorway and looked around the huge room with curious eyes. Then he smiled. The reaction was instant that a student from the Mellow system made a sharp, frightened squeal. 2 insect-like students in the back row pressed themselves against the wall as if trying to disappear into it. Near the middle of the room, a large furry creature panicked so badly that he actually fell out of his seat while trying to move away. The human blinked in confusion. His smile slowly faded. Professor Kalani's crystal body flickered with stress colors. "You must be the transfer student," she said carefully, her voice perfectly controlled. The human nodded politely. "Sorry for being late," he said. "My shuttle was delayed." His voice was calm and gentle. "My name is David Ward." He stepped into the aisle and started walking toward the empty seats. Students immediately pulled their legs away from the aisle. Some leaned as far from him as possible. Others pressed themselves against their neighbors just to avoid being close. David noticed. For a moment, something crossed his face. Hurt. But he didn't say anything. He simply kept walking until he found the first empty seat. IT was beside a student named Rillian. Rillian was small even for her own species. Soft blue feathers covered her body, and her large golden eyes reflected the blue glow of the gas giant outside. She came from a low-gravity world where her people spent most of their lives flying through endless skies. Here at the academy, the gravity was much stronger. She had to walk everywhere. IKT made her feel awkward and clumsy all the time. When David sat beside her, Rillian froze. Her feathers flattened tightly against her body. Her heart began beating so fast she thought it might burst. The human glanced at her. For a moment, they simply looked at each other. Then he gave a small, sad smile. "I won't hurt you," he said quietly. "I promise." Rillian couldn't answer. She just stared at him. Professor Kalani cleared her throat and continued the lecture, though her voice shook slightly. Every few seconds, she glanced toward David, as if expecting him to suddenly attack someone. Rillian tried to pay attention to the lesson. She really tried. But she kept watching the human from the corner of her. But he seemed normal. He quietly opened a small tablet and started taking notes. Sometimes he tilted his head when something interested him. Once he even yawned politely, covering his mouth with his hand. He looked completely harmless. But Rillian knew what humans were. Everyone did. Earth was classified as a death world. One of the most dangerous planets in the entire galaxy. Humans were pursuit predators. They didn't catch prey by speed or ambush. They chased it for hours, sometimes for days, until the prey collapsed from exhaustion. Their blood contained iron, a metal toxic to many species. Their bones healed stronger after breaking. They could eat plants that would poison most life forms. And worst of all, they showed their teeth when they were happy. That smile, that terrible predator smile. Halfway through the lecture, a small student from the Pelion species dropped her writing tool that IT rolled across. The floored IT stopped right beside David's foot. The Pelion student stared at it in horror. She clearly wanted it back, but she was too afraid to move. David noticed. He leaned down slowly, picked up the tool, and held it out to her. "Here you go," he said kindly. The Pelion student squeaked in terror, snatched the tool from his hand, and scrambled backward in her seat that David's hand slowly lowered. His smile faded again. He turned back to his tablet and continued taking notes. But Rillian noticed something in his eyes. Loneliness, confusion, pain. He didn't understand why everyone was afraid of him. When a lecture finally ended, students rushed toward the exits. They moved faster than Rillian had ever seen. Within seconds, the huge hall was almost empty. David stood slowly. He packed his tablet into his bag and looked around at the empty seats. His shoulders dropped slightly. Rillian should have left too. Every instinct told her to run from the predator beside her. But she didn't move. Something kept her sitting there. Maybe it was the way he returned that writing tool. Maybe it was the sadness in his eyes. "Wasn't always like this," she said suddenly. David looked at her in surprise. "What do you mean?" Rillian shifted nervously. "I mean, I didn't always run from you. You only arrived today." David let out a quiet laugh, but it wasn't a happy sound. "They ran the moment they saw me," he said. "I thought maybe humans had done something wrong, but no one will tell me what." Rillian opened her beak to answer, then closed it again. How could she explain? How could she tell him that his smile looked like a predator about to attack? That everything about him triggered ancient prey instincts in other species? David adjusted his bag. "I should go," he said softly. "Thank you for talking to me." He hesitated for a moment. "You're the first person who has." Then he turned and walked toward the door alone. Rillian watched him leave. Her mind was racing. Her entire life, she had been taught the same thing. Humans were monsters, predators from a death world, creatures that conquered everything they touched. But the young man who had just walked out of the classroom, he didn't look like a monster. He looked lonely. Rillian made a decision. She would learn the truth about humans. Not from warnings. Not from old war records. But from David himself, that IT was either the bravest decision she had ever made, or the stupidest. And she was about to find out which. The library on level 3 was the quietest place in the entire academy. Tall shelves filled with glowing data crystals stretched upward toward a ceiling painted with thousands of tiny stars. Soft floating lights drifted slowly through the aisles, following students who needed help reading. Rillian sat alone in the far corner. Her feathers were pressed tightly against her body, and on the screen in front of her was a single search word: human. She hesitated before opening the first file. Then she began reading. The very first line made her blood run cold. Earth, Category 12 Death World. Only 15 planets in the entire known galaxy had ever received that classification. Most of those worlds had never developed intelligent life at all. Their environments were simply too hostile for complex species to survive long enough to evolve. But humans had not only survived, they had thrived. Rillian swallowed nervously and continued reading. The files described human biology first. Humans were pursuit predators. Unlike most hunters, they didn't rely on speed or ambush. They chased prey across long distances, sometimes for hours, sometimes even for days. They simply followed, slowly, relentlessly, until the prey collapsed from exhaustion. And other known species hunted that way. Human bodies were built for endurance. Their skin cooled itself through sweating, allowing them to keep moving long after other predators needed to stop and rest. They could survive extreme heat. They could survive extreme cold. They could eat plants that were poisonous to most species in the galaxy. Rillian's feathers slowly rose with unease. Then she read something worse. When human bones broke, they healed stronger. The repaired bone grew thicker than before. Their blood contained iron, a metal toxic to many alien species. If a human bled on certain life forms, it would burn their skin like acid. Rillian leaned back from the screen slightly, and she had been sitting next to one of them. She scrolled further. The history files were even more disturbing. Humans had conquered their entire planet. Frozen poles, burning deserts, deep oceans, dense jungles. There were human settlements everywhere. They had driven hundreds of species on their own planet to extinction. Not always through cruelty, sometimes simply by existing. They adapted to every environment they encountered, like a fire spreading across dry grass. Then Rillian found the military records. Her claws trembled slightly as she opened a file. 200 years ago, during the border wars, a single human battalion had defended a strategic outpost against a massive Carthan army. The Cardhans were known across the galaxy as the greatest warriors in existence. They were twice the size of humans, stronger, heavily armored, and they had outnumbered the humans 50 to 1. The battle lasted 18 days. The humans won. Rillian stared at the screen. Attached to the file was a combat recording. She hesitated. Then she pressed play. The video showed a battlefield filled with smoke and shattered structures. Human soldiers were running. They ran across broken ground and burning debris. They kept running and running and running. Enemy soldiers tried to retreat, but the humans followed. They didn't rush. They didn't panic. They simply moved forward at a steady pace, relentless, unstoppable. When the exhausted enemy soldiers finally collapsed, the humans caught them, and many of them were smiling. Rillian shut the video off immediately. Her hands were shaking. Her heart pounded loudly in her chest. She thought about David, the quiet student who apologized for being late to class, the one who returned a dropped writing tool, the one who looked confused when everyone ran away from him. Could that gentle person really belong to the same species she had just watched? Another file caught her attention. The Deathworlder smile. Cultural analysis. Rillian opened it. The explanation was surprisingly simple. For most species in the galaxy, showing teeth was a universal sign of aggression. That IT meant danger. That IT meant attack. Predators bared their teeth before they killed, but humans were different. They showed their teeth when they were happy. They called it smiling. Humans. It meant friendship, warmth, welcome. But to every other species in the galaxy, it looked like a predator preparing to strike. Rillian slowly leaned back in her chair. When David had smiled at the class, he had been trying to be friendly. But everyone else had seen a threat he didn't even know. The library doors suddenly opened. Rillian looked up at a group of students walk toward her table. She recognized them from her history class. You could see the front was Melik, that he was tall, with four muscular arms and dark scales covering his body. Behind him stood two smaller students from the Hive Collective. They didn't look friendly. We saw you talking to the human, Melik said coldly. Rillian's feathers twitched nervously. He seemed nice. Melik made a disgusted sound. Nice? He leaned closer to the screen. Did you read what his species is capable of? They're monsters. They don't belong in this academy. Rillian frowned slightly. He didn't choose where he was born. That doesn't matter. Melik leaned closer. Listen to me, little bird. That human is dangerous. His people have killed billions. They conquered their own world, and they'll conquer ours if they get the chance. He pointed at the screen. Don't be fooled by his soft voice and sad eyes. That's how predators work. They make you feel safe first. Rillian wanted to argue, but the words refused to come out. Melik straightened. Stay away from him. For your own good. Then the group turned and walked away. The library fell silent again. Rillian looked back at the glowing screen. Page after page of terrifying information about humans. But she remembered something else she had read, a small cultural note hidden inside the files. Humans had a concept called friend. IT meant someone they care about deeply. Someone they would protect no matter the cost. Humans were loyal beyond reason. They would fight for their friends. Died for their friends. Travel across galaxies for their friends. Rillian slowly closed the files if the records were correct. Humans were the most dangerous species in existence, but they were also capable of the strongest loyalty. She stood up. Her decision was already made. Tomorrow she would talk to David again. She wanted to understand the human, not just fear him. She didn't know it yet, but that decision was about to change everything. Because the next time she saw David, half the academy would be watching, and not all of them wanted the human to stay. Lunchtime at the Galactic Academy was usually loud. Hundreds of species gathered inside the enormous cafeteria. The air was filled with strange smells from meals brought from dozens of different worlds. Conversations overlapped in hundreds of languages. Some students chirped while eating. Others clicked their mandibles. A few even communicated through flashes of color across their skin. The chaos was normal, comforting even. But today something was different. There was a quiet space in the middle of the room, a large empty circle of tables. And in the center of that circle sat David. He was alone at a table near the tall windows. Outside, the blue gas giant filled half the sky. Inside, students walked past with their trays, glanced at the human, and quickly moved away. Some didn't even try to hide their fear. They simply turned around and chose another direction. David didn't look up, but he slowly ate a simple vegetable meal prepared specially for him. Most galactic food wasn't safe for humans, so the Academy kitchen had created a few dishes he could eat. He focused on his plate, if pretending no one else existed. At the entrance of the cafeteria, Rillian stood holding her tray. Her heart was beating fast. Every instinct told her the same thing. Sit somewhere else, stay safe, stay away from the predator. Instead, she walked toward him. The cafeteria slowly became quieter as she crossed the room. Students stopped talking. Dozens of eyes followed her to BY. The time she reached David's table, nearly half the room had gone silent. She sat down across from him. David looked up, his eyes widened with surprise. "What are you doing?" he asked. Rillian tried to keep her voice steady. "Eating lunch. Is that not allowed?" David glanced around at the staring students. "You don't have to do this," he said quietly. "People will think badly of you." Rillian shrugged slightly. "Let them." David studied her for a long moment. Then slowly he smiled. Rillian forced herself not to flinch. She remembered what the files had said, that a human smile meant friendship, not danger. "Thank you," David said softly. "I don't even know your name." "Rillian. I'm from the Kestrel system." David's eyes lit with curiosity. "The low-gravity world?" Rillian blinked. "You know about it?" "I read about it before coming here." "Your people can fly, right?" A small spark of pride warmed Rillian's chest. "Yes. Well, on our home world we can. The gravity here is too strong, so I have to walk like everyone else." "That must be difficult," David said. "It is," Rillian admitted. "But I wanted to study here. Some things are worth the difficulty." They ate quietly for a moment. Around them, the cafeteria slowly returned to its usual noise, but people kept glancing in their direction, watching, whispering. David finally set down his eating tool. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Why is everyone afraid of me?" His voice was calm, but there was sadness behind the question. "I try to be polite. I smile at people. I keep my distance. But they run from me like I'm going to hurt them." He looked down at his hands. "What did I do wrong?" Rillian hesitated. Choosing the right words was difficult. "It's not what you did," she said carefully. "It's what you are. A human. A death worlder. Your planet is very dangerous. Your species is very capable. Most of us grew up hearing stories about humans. Scary stories." David's expression fell slightly. "I'm not scary," he said quietly. "I just wanted to learn about other cultures. That's why I joined this exchange program." Rillian nodded. "I believe you. But it will take time for others to see that." David slowly nodded. Then he reached into his bag. "Can I show you something?" He pulled out a small device and activated the screen. An image appeared. It showed a furry creature with 4 legs, a long tail, and a wide face. Its tongue hung happily from its mouth. "This is Bruno," David said warmly, "my dog." "You have animals like that on your world?" Rillian asked. "Yes. Dogs are companion animals. We've kept them for thousands of years. We actually bred them from wolves." Rillian's feathers lifted in alarm. "Wolves? Pack predators?" David nodded. "A long time ago, humans and wolves learned to work together. We gave them food. They helped us hunt. Over generations, they changed. They became dogs. Now they're family." Rillian stared at the image. "You turn a predator into a friend?" David smiled. "Actually, we turn each other into friends. Dogs change humans too. They made us more social, more caring." He looked at the image affectionately. "Bruno sleeps in my bed at home. When I'm sad, he knows. He sits beside me until I feel better." Rillian searched for the right word. "That's beautiful." David looked up at her. His strange, forward-facing eyes were gentle. "Humans aren't monsters, Rillian. We can be dangerous, but we can also be kind. We can make friends with anyone." He paused. "Even aliens who are afraid of us." Before Rillian could reply, a shadow fell over the table. She looked up. Borix stood there. The Karthan warrior towered above them, nearly 7 feet tall. Thick gray skin covered his massive body, and long tusks curved upward from his lower jaw. 4 more Karthans stood behind him. Borax was famous across the academy. Not for intelligence, for bullying. Well, Borax said, his deep voice rumbling like grinding stone. The little bird has made a friend. David slowly stood up. Even standing, he barely reached Borax's chest, but he didn't step back. We don't want any trouble, David said calmly. Borax laughed. The Death Worlder doesn't want trouble. How amusing. He leaned down until his massive face was close to David's. Listen carefully, human. You don't belong here. Your kind isn't welcome. Leave the academy, or we'll make you leave. The cafeteria had gone completely silent again. Every student was watching. David's smile had disappeared, but he still looked calm. No, he said simply. Borax's eyes narrowed. What did you say? I said no. I passed the same entrance tests as everyone else here. I earned my place. I'm not leaving just because you don't like my species. For a moment, no one moved. The tension in the room felt like electricity. Then Borax straightened. This isn't over, human. He turned and walked away with his followers. David slowly sat down again. His hands trembled slightly. Are you okay? Rillian asked. Yes, David said quietly. I'm just not used to being threatened by aliens. New experience. Despite everything, Rillian laughed. After a moment, David laughed too. And for the first time since arriving at the academy, the human wasn't eating alone, but Borax hadn't forgotten the challenge. And only a few days later, he would come back. This time with 6 warriors, and the quiet human everyone feared would finally show them what a Death Worlder could really do. 3 days passed after the cafeteria incident. Borax didn't appear again, at least not in public. But that didn't mean the tension had disappeared. If anything, it had grown worse. Whispers followed David everywhere he went. Students watched him from a distance in hallways. Some moved away when he approached. Others stared as if they were trying to understand what kind of creature he really was. Rillian noticed something else too. David never reacted. He didn't argue. He didn't glare back. He simply continued attending classes, taking notes, and quietly learning like any other student. But she could see the loneliness behind his calm expression. That evening, Rillian and David left the engineering lecture together. The hallway outside the classroom was unusually quiet. Most students had already gone to dinner. The long corridor stretched ahead of them, lit by soft blue ceiling lights. Rillian was in the middle of explaining orbital mechanics when she suddenly stopped walking. 6 large shapes stepped out from a side passage. Borax stood in the center. Behind him were 5 other Carthan warriors. Their massive bodies blocked the hallway. Rillian's feathers flattened instantly. Borax, she whispered. David sighed quietly. I was wondering when you'd show up again. Borax slowly cracked his knuckles. You embarrassed me in the cafeteria. You made me look weak. David crossed his arms calmly. That wasn't my intention. Borax's tusks curled upward in a cruel smile. Intentions don't matter. Reputation does. He glanced down at Rillian. Leave, little bird. This doesn't concern you. Rillian didn't move. Borax's voice became colder. Last chance. David stepped slightly in front of her. She's staying. Borax laughed loudly. The other Carthans joined him. You think you can protect her? Borax said, You're half my size. Your bones are fragile. Your skin has no armor. He stepped forward. Your prey, pretending to be a predator. David tilted his head slightly. Is that what you believe? Borax's patience snapped. Enough talking. He swung his massive fist. The punch was fast enough that most species would never see it coming. But David moved. He didn't step away. He stepped inside the strike. Borax's fist flew past his shoulder. Before anyone understood what was happening, David grabbed Borax's arm and twisted. There was a loud crack as the larger warrior crashed face first into the floor. The hallway went silent. Borax groaned in shock. His arm was pinned behind his back. David held him there effortlessly. I really didn't want to do that, David said calmly. The other 5 Carthans stared in disbelief. Borax was the strongest among them. He was also twice the human's mass. Yet somehow, he was lying helpless on the ground. One of the other warriors roared and charged. David released Borax instantly and turned. The second Carthan swung wildly. David ducked at a quick movement, a precise strike to the knee. The giant warrior collapsed. Another charged. Then another. Rillian. Everything happened too quickly to follow. David moved. Like flowing water, every motion was controlled. Efficient, he never attacked first. But every time one of them struck, he ended the fight in seconds. Within half a minute, 6 Cardhans are on the floor, groaning, defeated. David stood in the center of the hallway, breathing steadily. Not even exhausted. Rillian stared at him. Her mind struggled to understand what she had just witnessed. You said humans were weak, she whispered. David rubbed the back of his neck awkwardly. Compared to most species here, we are. Cardhans are stronger than humans. By a lot. Rillian blinked. Then how did you win? David shrugged. Humans focus more on technique. We study leverage, balance, momentum. We call it martial arts. He looked around at the fallen warriors. And honestly, they attacked one at a time. That made it easier. Borix slowly pushed himself up, rage burning in his eyes. This isn't over, human. But before he could finish, a loud alarm exploded through the corridor. Red emergency lights flashed across the walls. A mechanical voice echoed through the station. Warning. Warning. Structural breach detected. Outer ring damage. All students proceed to evacuation zones. Rillian's heart skipped. What's happening? The floor trembled slightly beneath their feet. Then the voice returned. Asteroid impact detected. Multiple hull breaches. Station integrity compromised. Students began running through the corridors. Panic spread instantly. Doors slammed open. Emergency sirens screamed. David grabbed Rillian's arm. We need to move. But the shaking suddenly became violent. The distant explosion echoed through the station. The lights flickered. Then half the hallway ceiling collapsed behind them. Dust and debris filled the air. Students screamed. Borix and his warriors scrambled to their feet in fear. Another announcement echoed through the chaos. Outer evacuation shuttles destroyed. Repeat. Outer shuttles destroyed. Rillian felt her chest tighten. Then how do we escape? David looked down the hallway. His expression had completely changed. The quiet student was gone. In his place stood something else, focused, determined. There's still one way, he said. The maintenance hangar. But it's on the far side of the station, Rillian said. That section was hit first. David nodded. Which means no one else will go there. He looked at the terrified students around them. Then back at Rillian. Stay close to me. Why? She asked. David's voice became very calm. Because humans are really good at surviving disasters. He grabbed her hand. Let's go. And as the Academy station began breaking apart around them, the most feared species in the galaxy was about to do something no one expected. Save everyone. The station was dying. Metal screamed as sections of the Academy twisted under pressure. Emergency lights flashed red across every corridor. The artificial gravity flickered, making students stumble as they ran. Some were crying. Some were frozen in panic. Others were simply running without knowing where to go. David moved through the chaos like he had done this before. Stay behind me, he told Rillian. She nodded, trying to keep up as he ran down the shaking corridor. Another explosion thundered somewhere deep in the station. The floor tilted slightly. Several students fell. David stopped instantly. He grabbed one of them, a small insectoid. Student whose leg had been trapped under a broken panel. Without hesitation, David lifted the heavy metal plate and pulled the student free. Can you walk? He asked. The creature nodded weakly. Then follow us. Soon there were 5 students running behind him. Then 8, then 12. The word spread quickly through the corridors. Students began following the human, because he looked like the only one who knew what he was doing. Rillian realized something strange. David wasn't panicking. Not even a little. His eyes moved constantly, studying the environment, watching the ceiling, watching the walls, calculating. David, she said while running beside him, how do you know where to go? He pointed forward. Maintenance corridors run along the structural frame of the station. They're stronger, less likely to collapse. Rillian blinked in surprise. You memorized the station layout? David shrugged while running. Humans do that. Preparation helps survival. Another violent tremor shook the hallway. A loud metallic crack echoed above them. Move, David shouted. The ceiling collapsed behind them seconds later. Students screamed and ran faster by the time they reached the maintenance sector. More than 30 students were following him. Rillian looked back at the terrified crowd. Species from 10 different worlds, all trusting the human they once feared. They finally reached the large maintenance hangar. The door was half open. Inside sat a single emergency shuttle, small, old, barely designed for 10 passengers. David stopped. Rillian's heart dropped. "There's not enough space," she whispered. The students behind them began murmuring in fear. David studied the shuttle carefully. Then he nodded to himself. "It'll work." He ran inside the hangar. Students watched as he climbed onto the shuttle's exterior panel and opened a maintenance hatch. Sparks flew as he pulled out wiring. "What are you doing?" Rillian asked. "Modifying it," he replied. "For what?" "To hold more people." "That's impossible." David gave a small smile. Humans are good at impossible things. For the next 3 minutes, he worked faster than Rillian had ever seen anyone move. Panels opened, circuits rewired, seats removed, storage compartments cleared. Finally, he jumped down. "Okay," he said. "How many of you can stand?" Most of the students raised their hands. "Good." Everyone inside. They crowded into the shuttle. 43 students squeezed into a space built for 10. The air became hot and cramped. David climbed into the pilot's seat. "Hold on to something," he said. The shuttle engines roared to life. The hangar doors slowly opened. Outside space was filled with drifting debris from the damaged station that Rillian's breath caught. "That's impossible to fly through." David's hands rested calmly on the controls. "We'll find a path." Humans always do. The shuttle launched. Metal fragments floated everywhere. Broken pieces of the station spun slowly through space. David guided the shuttle through narrow gaps. Left. Right. Down. Up. Several times the shuttle barely avoided collision. Students screamed behind them. But David never hesitated. He moved the ship with calm precision. Then suddenly a massive piece of debris drifted directly into their path. Too large to dodge. Rillian felt fear freeze her body. "We're going to hit it." David's voice remained steady. No, at the last second he fired the side thrusters. The shuttle spun sideways and slipped past the debris with only meters to spare. Minutes later, stars filled the viewport. They had escaped the debris field. The station behind them continued breaking apart. Inside the shuttle, silence filled the air. Dozens of alien students stared at the human pilot. The same human they once feared. The same human they once avoided. David leaned back in his seat and finally relaxed. "Everyone okay back there?" No one answered at first. Then a small voice spoke. "Human." It was one of the insectoid students he had rescued earlier. "Yes." "Why did you help us?" David looked confused by the question. "Why wouldn't I?" "You were in danger too." "Yes. But humans don't leave people behind." Rillian watched him quietly. The files in the library had been right. Humans were dangerous. They were relentless. They survived things that should kill them. They could defeat stronger enemies. But the files had missed something important. The reason the galaxy feared humans wasn't just their strength. It was their loyalty, their courage, their refusal to abandon others. Days later, the story spread across the academy, then across the sector, then across the galaxy. The story of the human student, the one who fought 6 warriors without fear, the one who led dozens through a collapsing station, the one who saved 43 lives. And for the first time, students at the Galactic Academy stopped running away when David entered a room. Instead, they smiled back.